Hi there, and welcome to another episode of the Rabid Dog House, where we like to discuss lost or forgotten horror gems with a little bit of bite. I'm your host, Justin Steele, and tonight we are going to discuss 2016's Red Christmas. Directed by Craig Anderson and starring Dee Wallace, Geoff Morrell, Sarah Bishop, David Collins, Janis McGavin, and Gerard Odwyer. A bickering but loving family gathers for one last Christmas celebration at their family home, led by matriarch Diane, played by Dee Wallace. The celebration is interrupted by a cloaked stranger of whom threatens to expose long-kept secrets, and the holiday soon turns from laughter to terrified screams. Red Christmas is a dazzling display of twinkling colors juxtaposing the gory effects and deep politics threatening to tear one family apart. Red Christmas is for the horror fan that enjoys holiday-themed horror with gory effects and a low-budget feel. Also joining me tonight is the amazing Zena Dixon. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us for another episode of the Rabid Dog House. Tonight, I'm super excited. We have, as always, the fabulous, amazing, talented, superb Zena Dixon, the real queen of horror. How you doing tonight, Zena?
I'm doing well, Justin. Thank you so much.
For sure. I am excited. This is our fourth annual holiday episode. We've talked about, it was first Wind Chill. Then we talked about all the Black Christmases. Last year we did P2, and this year we are covering 2016's Red Christmas. Now, I am a fan of this movie. It's not like my favorite go-to holiday horror movie, but it was going to be a win for me no matter what, being that Dee Wallace stars in it. She's my favorite. I love her and everything. But I do think that there is a lot to enjoy about this movie. It might not be everybody's taste, but I do love I feel like it shows yet again how successful a low budget horror movie can be, how you can do a lot with very little. Especially if you do have like a talented actress like Dee Wallace. I feel like Dee Wallace, she does sometimes get looped with the scream queens, which I totally admire and respect. But I also think that Dee Wallace kind of is more like a Vincent Price or a Christopher Lee or the Donald Pleasance of horror. That's how I think of Dee Wallace. She has been in so many horror movies. She's played villains, the girl next door, the wife, the mother, and her talent is just, immeasurable. Well, this one, she does that same thing. A part of the reason why she wanted to join it was because it was another tour de force performance, such as with Cujo, which, is my favorite of all horror movies is Cujo. But she really leads this cast. You really can feel, she tethers everybody together to make it feel like this family movie. Now, I don't know what it is about Christmas movies, but I feel like they tend to be a little more violent than other horror movies. It's almost like a prerequisite. I mean, if you think about it, Black Christmas, by today's standards, it's not particularly violent, but back then that would have been horrifyingly gory and violent. The Silent Night, Deadly Night movies are particularly violent. We now have the new, I think it's like Violent Christmas or the Violent Santa movie that just kind of came out.
Night,
Yeah, in the title. And this Red Christmas from 2016 is no less violent. It definitely has that. But I think it makes a lot of bold choices. As always, everybody, this is the non-spoiler point of the review. We will then let you know when spoilers come. But from a non-spoiler point of view, it's a very bold movie. But again, being that we are fans of Dario Argento, it obviously, picks from his color palette of movies like Suspiria and Inferno, where you sort of have this like candy color, but in this film, where Dario Argento definitely it's more operatic or grand, it's also another example of how you can kind of have that same effect on a low budget, and it's very organic to the movie because it's Christmas time. So these Christmas lights in the daylight that you kind of only little notice, once the lights go out, the film really uses that light to let you know the story and really emphasizes the Christmas aspect of it. But again, it's not without its problems. I watched this with some friends, and surprisingly, what they were most annoyed with was like the character of Ginny being pregnant and like smoking and drinking and doing all this stuff. Now, me, I don't really, I guess as a man, I don't really, whatever a woman decides to do, which is also a very prevalent point of this movie, whatever she decides to do, I feel like I just can't have really much of a say in it. But my friend definitely had a reaction to it. But I think it's interesting because it is a very political movie without it all being a political movie, meaning there's no, either side of the abortion debate could very much feel like they won. Like you
Mhm.
could say, like, if you're pro-life, there are a lot of things that would be like, see, this is why we, shouldn't have abortions.
Right.
But I feel like on the flip side of that, if you're pro-choice, there's a lot of arguments that are for with this movie that are like, see, this is why we should have abortions. And I think that that is what the best kind of political movies do, are that
Mhm.
present these ideas in a way that lets everybody kind of win and lose and does it without effort. It's effortlessly done. And another example of a horror movie being able to handle such topics in a way that's with an entertainment at the forefront. It's not about that per se. It's a clear-cut slasher movie, but it also has some deeper things going on. But Zena, I didn't even ask you before we started if you're even a fan of this movie. Are you a fan of this one? What are your thoughts? How did you first come to it? For me, how I first came to it, Dee Wallace. I knew she was going to be in it. I was watching it.
Yes. So same. I'm a huge fan of Dee Wallace. I think that her acting is incredible, and she does not disappoint in this movie. I don't know how I feel about this one because it's like there are some things, just being honest, that is just like, maybe cringe. You know, there's a particular, I think you probably know what I'm, so we'll get into it, where it kind of made me cringe, but it's kind of like, okay, it is mean, and so it's just like, if you love slashers and you love Dee Wallace, you'll want to check this one out. And so like I remember hearing about it obviously because of a couple of years ago because of Dee Wallace, and we talked about this before, where not on purpose, I didn't finish the movie. I would start it, but I didn't finish it because life happens, things come up, whatever the case may be. And when I did finish it, I was able to finish it last week. It is very shocking, and it's more shocking for me because of how mean it is. Because I wasn't expecting that. I knew it was going to be like, oh, people's getting killed, but no, it's like there was a couple of stuff where I literally screamed, but it was like in a good way because it's like it's unexpected. It is very much an indie movie, so if you have an appreciation for indie movies, you'll enjoy this. But if if you don't watch a lot of indie movies, don't shy away from this one. I would definitely watch the movie again. So it's just like, but I'm still a little bit on the fence because it's just like I love when movies have these families that are kind of annoying, and they have issues that's going on. And then again, Dee Wallace is like, her performance, we'll get into it, but her scream alone, like you feel it, you feel it, and you feel for all the characters. Like it's weird. This is kind of jumping ahead. You feel for all the characters, but then it's just kind of like, well, I do like peace. But yeah, so we'll get into it. So I'm a little bit on the fence. I am, with me saying that I would watch it again, that's a good thing. So it's just, this movie is definitely, which you touched on, it's not going to be for everyone, but I did enjoy it.
Agreed and well said. And from here on out, everybody, spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. Take a peek at this one and come back and watch this review. But yeah, it is kind of a mean-spirited movie. I think that that is definitely a part of the horror genre at time. I think you and I tend to lean towards more ones that aren't mean,
Mm-hmm.
that are just for the thrill of it, the fun of it. I think
Right.
we want to come away feeling like some sort of joy, even if like these horrible things happen. We want to feel that like we just got off the roller coaster. And this one
Mm-hmm.
does definitely have a bleak ending. It's definitely there's a lot of mean spiritedness to it. Which
Mm-hmm.
I think, also reminds me of like a film like Silent Night, Deadly Night. Something about the
Mm-hmm.
Christmas genre. These movies are made. I don't know if these directors, creators had some really bad Christmases as they were kids or something, but there is something almost mean spirit about it. Even the original Black Christmas, the reason why I don't think it became sort of the seminal movie that Halloween became was because it does sort of leave you with this sort of emptiness inside at the end of it, maybe because of the Christmas tied into it.
Yeah.
Whereas Halloween, even though kind of the same things happen, you have the person surviving. I feel like when people watched it the first time, you felt scared but like excited coming out of it,
Right.
or at least I
Right.
think that's how most people felt. But these Christmas movies have a tendency to, I don't know, leave a wallop. And I do like, though, and you touched upon this about family, that's part of being in a family, is that you have sort of these bickering fights. And I think that Dee Wallace, like we said, it makes it feel like it's a real family. She tethers everybody,
Right.
creates a foundation. But as you notice, like between Susie and Ginny, there's this sort of
Mhm.
rivalry. Hope is the youngest, so she sort of has an attitude, but she clearly like wants to be with the family.
Right.
Jerry is full of love and spirit, but also kind of caught in the middle. And I
Mhm.
will say that this movie does make some bold choices in terms of the inclusion of the character of Jerry, one, which I think is
Mhm.
awesome, but also the fact that Cletus, the killer, is somebody with Down syndrome.
Mhm.
Now, I do have a problem with what they ended up doing with the effect of Cletus at the end. Like, I don't like that Down syndrome necessarily would be equated with this monstrous form, but I think
Right.
that that's also supposed to be a commentary on the underdevelopedness of Cletus as he
Mhm.
was saved from abortion. Now, I will say I don't understand, again, from my understanding with an abortion, I don't know how Cletus could have survived at all but I don't
Right.
know if in Australia it's different how later term they can be, which maybe is why this movie was filmed in Australia. But I don't see how he could have even, survived. But
Mhm.
maybe that's why. But I will say I do like the idea of a killer with Down syndrome. I think
Mhm.
that it should definitely be that anybody could be a killer. It shouldn't just be the Jerry character. It should
Right.
be this sort of balance. And why this movie, one thing that I think is commendable about it is that you do sort of have that moment with Jerry and Cletus where they sort of have this connection, and neither one attacks the other one or hurts the
Mhm.
other one, because there's this sort of like deeper understanding between the
Mhm.
two of them, knowing that although Cletus is in a much horrifying way, their place in the family is a little bit different. They're handled
Yeah.
a little bit differently. And I just think that was a really brave choice for this movie, especially because I think that Jerry, as much as I love Dee Wallace and she is clearly the star of this movie, I think he does kind of upstage her in certain
He
moments.
does.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty cool because that's not an easy thing to do. Because, like you said, Dee Wallace, I've watched a lot of special features with her, interviews with her, where she talks about her method of acting, and it is a very like natural way of acting. She doesn't like to rehearse a lot, and I think that's why we get the screams that we do out of
Mhm.
her, or the moments, because they're authentic. They're always this. The actor who played Jerry, I feel like his name is also Gerald. It's like Gerald Odwyer. I don't think I'm able to pronounce anybody's name in this movie. I tried last night.
It's
Other,
okay.
yeah, but Gerald, who plays Jerry, he also clearly has this naturalistic way of being with everybody, and I just really
Mhm.
appreciated that from a performance standpoint. But in terms of the performances, you know, we have Dee Wallace, who clearly shines this movie. She's the aberrant 50s mother, wants her
Mhm.
family to have a good time, wants to have this, but the arc that she has over the movie, which I'm sure we'll keep coming back to as we go through the film, is obviously amazing. I did like the character Ginny, but again, I was surprised by reactions that people were having to her in terms of the smoking and the drinking. I thought like, to each their own, I guess. But I liked the juxtaposition to her and Susie. I thought it was funny with Peter, all the little where he's sort of this priest, but he's like taking peeks at Ginny's husband.
Yeah. That was.
I just thought there were some little funny family moments in there, but cringy moments too. There are a
Mhm.
lot of cringy moments in there. But in terms of the performances overall, what did you think of like everybody involved?
I feel like everybody did a great job. I agree with you, Jerry. He did a great job, and I loved his character. It broke my heart, because it just seemed like he wanted to have fun. He wanted everybody to have fun, and I like the blend of the family. It's very the movie itself to me. It is very frightening and just very disturbing in some ways. But then you meet this family, and there's tension, there's drama, there's rivalry, people don't get along. But I was very intrigued with the character Cletus. I'm not too sure, just being honest with you, why Diane Dee Wallace's character let him in. I don't understand it. Like honestly, like think about if someone, because Cletus is very tall and he was wearing like a dark cloak where you couldn't even see his face. I'm sorry, I'm not gonna let you in my house, in my home. But Diane, she was so sweet and inviting. She's definitely that motherly figure. Even before like chaos like kind of like pops off, she, "Oh, here's a gift for you," and she wraps up like the jar of peanuts. It's sweet, but it's like I really enjoyed the acting, especially again because this is an indie movie. And I know sometimes with some indie movies, it can get like they can get like a bad name for the performances. But honestly, everyone on screen, they were believable. I found myself hooked to it. Even when I started before and I didn't finish, I was intrigued. You believe that that family did not get along. You believe that they were an actual family. And so not only just with that too, what I found interesting is the fact that Diane, going back to her again, how she wanted to sell the home that they were in, and this was going to be their last Christmas in that home. And so there's a lot of tension that was going on. Then you also have Susie, who her and her husband, they could not conceive a child. So it's just like, so there's, but then just to see Jenny, that's why to me it was just like, no, I don't agree with that. You drinking and smoking cigarettes, but the fact that you're doing that right in front of your sister when she's clearly having trouble, it wasn't for me so much of her religion, because yeah, they were cursing and doing whatever they want, but it was just more of you're drinking and you're smoking, and she was having the best time, so it was just you can definitely feel the vibe, the rivalry. So that's what I mean with that, where it's just like as the viewer you felt engaged with the performances, with the characters.
Yeah, I think one mainly, I would have definitely not let somebody in that was dressed like that, acting like that. That being said, I do think that it is believable that Dee Wallace's character would do that because I know my mom is the type that would let somebody in like that. Like literally, though, this is the stuff I like yell at her about. Like, Mom, sometimes you can't be so nice, can't be so sweet. She'd be the one with wrapping up a thing of peanuts over there, and it's like it's super sweet, but also you got to be careful. You
Yeah.
can't just let somebody coming in that looks like this. And I think that it's definitely a tragic story for Cletus.
Mm-hmm.
I think that makes it more difficult because he's obviously killing everybody one by one by one.
Mm-hmm.
But the guy, when he was walking, was obviously very mean to him. Dee tried to be nice, but then he triggered within her, Diane, the character of Diane, the past.
Mm-hmm.
And then, they threw the jar at his head and stuff. So it's
Yeah.
sort of like, but that's what's interesting too about this movie is that like everybody has a motivating factor. I mean, each of the characters from Ginny to Susie, even though, they're carved out in a way that exactly who each one of them is, where they're at in life. But as usual, I think when we get around our family, we tend to de-age a little bit. We tend to like revert back to like behaviors we had as
Yeah.
children, depending on what family we're going to visit. Like me, if I'm visiting my brothers and my mom and dad, I become the youngest again and that sort of thing. But I think that, yeah, I would never let that guy in. But again, Cletus, it is a tragic story with him. He had this whole life of religion thrown on him, no clue what's going on. But again, leading into the political aspect of the movie, I think it's interesting because, again, you can't quite determine, if abortion was, legal, it wouldn't have been, or, if abortion wasn't treated the way it was, there wouldn't have been a bombing. So Cletus could never have done all this. If
Mm-hmm.
Diane never wanted to get abortion because you couldn't, she would have had Cletus, who would never have done this. So, like, again, that's
Right.
something I do enjoy about this movie is that no matter how you look at it, though, no, like, but if Cletus, had been aborted, again, he couldn't kill the family, and it's so on and so on. Like, no matter how you look at it. But again, with the character Jerry too, I wanted to say nobody in this movie survives. Like we said already, spoilers. And I think that that's admirable too. That you don't want a character like Jerry to be harmed, but for the sake of like the tribute of what this movie's trying to say, everybody's got to go.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's got to go. And I think that that was one of the bolder choices that was needed. And I'm glad, like, the director Craig Anderson had no issues following through on all these
Mm-hmm.
ideas. And I know he collaborated a lot with Dee Wallace on it, and she was so with this too, which just goes to show what a contributing actress she is and
Mhm.
performer. But overall, too, what did you think of the look of the film, the different colored lights? Obviously, I love that. Like, that's
Yeah.
one of the things that just draws me to it. It's why I love
Mhm.
Inferno, Suspiria, those movies. And
Oh,
I, again, because it's so organic to this movie, it really works. But with the low budget film, it really pops. I loved it. Did you like the look of the film?
I love the look of the film. It is very, very stylish. Like it keeps you hooked. And it made sense. It wasn't like random because it is like, Christmas. It's around the holidays. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Because most of us we do have like lights up and stuff and just different tents. So that's exactly what would happen. So yeah, I feel like again, like for it to be like a indie movie and because again, I keep on saying it, it is a very well shot movie. And not saying that, indie movies can't have that, but I'm not gonna lie too, like based on the cover, I wasn't expecting to love the look so much.
Yeah, it's such a visually satisfying movie.
Mm-hmm.
I think, like, despite the heavy-handed tone, well, actually, despite the heavy-handed ideas, despite, whether you enjoy the performances, I think that one thing most people, whether you would love or hate this movie, can enjoy the look of it. You're
Mm-hmm.
going to be fed visually. You're going though that stimuli is going to be appealed. And I do
Yeah.
think that like horror fans, there is definitely that the group out there that just love a look of a horror movie, look of
Mm-hmm.
it, and I think this one does well. But it does fun stuff too, where using the lights or different camera angles, stuff that like a low budget movie can do so well. Like there's a shot with the gun where she's like walking with the gun, and because of the way it's filmed, you really feel the like panic. You can hear her breathing as she's like walking through the gun because it's the point of view. But also I like as the movie goes along, each scene, whether you're on the staircase or by the Christmas tree, different events happen in each thing. Like the reveal when Diane reveals that this could be true to Peter, like just the lighting in that area, or the bright pinkness of the girl's bedroom, where
Mm-hmm.
this other horrifying event is going on, horrifying because of the way it's happening, where
Mm-hmm.
Ginny goes into labor, but it's in such a candy colored pink, hot pink room. So it's sort of this like juxtaposition, but also of all the colors, the most red to symbolize the blood that is coming. And I just think that's like a very cool thing. I do want to also talk about Peter though, because I also love this movie. What made me think of it is the lights, and when he's sort of dragged through all the lights, Peter, Cletus finally grabs him on the stairs, he's being dragged. But also, like, I love that again, because Cletus isn't just a one-dimensional, or I'm sorry, two-dimensional character. He stops with Peter to pray. And I remember thinking that was a really interesting scene where even though Peter believes in what he believes in, knowing what he knows about Cletus, he still
Mm-hmm.
realizes like this person has to be stopped and
Yeah.
decides to try and like take him out. And I just remember really enjoying that scene. But that also leads me to what I want to talk about next with you. Anything you want to address with that, let me know. But also just the effects, what your thoughts are about them, because obviously they're not particularly realistic effects, but I love them. The horror fan in me loves that because I love that kind of gore. I love gore that's obviously fake. Again, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not a big fan of the Hostel movies and stuff like that, where you come away feeling like, ooh, did somebody lose their eye?
Yeah.
I want to know that like, okay, nobody got hurt, but wow. And
Mm-hmm.
Peter at the end of that scene, Cletus gets the upper hand, and Peter gets blended. And but what do you think of all the gore and the effects and all that? Or was there anything you wanted to address regarding the other stuff?
Well, I have to talk about the gore. I love the gore. I'm just like you, where sometimes if it's a little bit too real, I'm like, oh no. I mean, I'll still keep watching,
For
but there's
sure.
just something about like the cheesiness. It kind of has like that 80s, early 90s type of feel to it, which I'm living for. So one of my favorite death scenes though, was what happened to Hope, which is literally the
Yes.
first one. Because it was very much unexpected. Next thing you know, you just see, you see her, it's like a low shot, you see her feet, and then she literally gets like chopped in half. And it's just like, whoa, and that's like the start. And then when the family finds her, first off, I'm getting out of there, like I'm getting out of there. But yeah, and I don't know, if you love, like you said, as a horror fan, if you love like a little bit of cheese, I feel like this is what makes it fun. Where it's like, and that's what I mean. Like there are a lot of things about it, about this film, where it's just like it just works. perhaps it may not work with in another film, but with this one it does.
Yeah, in fact, I think Hope is also my other favorite moment. One, again, it is so unexpected, like you said, because you seem like you're going to be led in a direction. They set up the whole peanuts thing. They set up the allergy. You know, the peanuts are right there on the floor. I'm like, oh, she's going to have an allergic reaction and nobody's going to find her. And then bam, no, she's sliced in half. And I love it for a lot of different reasons. One, because of it's so obviously like unrealistic that that could happen, but that's what I kind of love about it. I love that even though it's unrealistic, it looks realistic. Like in a way that, like, of course, I don't think he would have the strength to do that. But the rest of the movie, you keep seeing her feet. But even when you see the way her feet kind of like fall in the moment,
Yeah.
love it. I think it looks great. Like Peter when he's getting his head blended, it's clearly a model of fake, but it looks cool as the blood's like coming up through. Or again with Susie and the arrow, but the way that she keeps taking like steps down the stairs because you know she's the most prim and proper. So of course she wouldn't just fall; she would take these little dainty steps down the stairs, and it's unrealistic. But that's part of the joy of this movie. I think. I think the gore is what makes it less. It makes it more of a fantasy movie, more of a fake, fun horror movie, as opposed to the scary gore or you know again the type that we said that like yeah I'll keep watching those too, but again I almost start to feel sick. I never felt sick watching this. It's sort of like I almost feel like you know an 18-year-old frat boy like yeah dude, you know, which is not a phrase I ever use, but you know we watch a movie like that, oh man dude, you know that's how I feel watching the gore in this type of movie.
I will say though, the opening of the movie does not prepare you to what is to come, you know, so it's just kind of like it surprised me because again of how violent it, you know, this movie became over time. And even just with the topic alone, I've never seen anything like this. So I will say with that, if this is a very like ambitious and creative like slasher. So again, like if you do like slasher movies, this is one that, and Christmas movies and horror, on Dee Wallace, there's just so much. This is one to definitely add to the list with that. But yeah, the opening scene to me, like that was awesome.
Yeah, I'm glad you did want to talk about the opening scene. First, the first few moments when I first started watching, I thought maybe I was watching an ad for something else. You
Yes.
know, like I'm like, what is this? Then you have the bomb exploding stuff, and I'm like, oh. But yeah, I really thought I was like watching something else. Like this is the movie I thought I was going to watch, and you really think that's going to play such a huge part. Instead, it's topical for you know 2016. It was as much as it is today, you know, still an
Yeah.
issue, but it was back, it was taking the swing back again. And they really hit their nose, like hit the hammer on the nose with it in terms of if you watch, if you really slow it down and watch the scenes, you see that he is Craig Anderson taking both sides or showing both sides. But again, it does beg the question of the problem with extremists on either side. I believe that everybody should have their own rights and beliefs, but I also think that it's extremists on both sides of the coin that tend to lead us into point of no return situations. And this guy, he's trying to save lives, but willing to take lives to save lives. I mean, when does it become that? And this guy, you know, clearly looks a little off kilter. You know, he's got this suitcase, so you know he's been traveling around doing some stuff. And the fact that Cletus, you know, he didn't take Cletus in to like raise him lovingly. He like took Cletus in to kind of raise him as a soldier. So again, it's again makes you kind of think the extremist part of it versus you know the everyday person part of it and the problems with it.
Right.
But I think the opening of the movie really doesn't set you up for what's going to happen. It's interesting, and again obviously we come back to that again and again, and everything is a result of this moment that almost looks like a political ad or something, and I think it's really
I
cool.
agree. Also, it was just kind of, it's kind of disturbing that the child that she wanted to abort found her and, you know, came back into her life. It was like, whoa, you know, and it's just like she, of course, she was so triggered by it. And, you know, I don't think it was more of a, you know, because she wanted to come off perfect to her kids. It was probably just like a time during her life that she didn't want to, obviously, she didn't want her kids to know about, you know? So I'm not saying that she was ashamed, but she could have been. So it was like cringy where it's just like I was wondering like is this where it's going? Like when I saw Cletus, I knew I knew, and it was just kind of like a very shocking type of moment. Then also with Peter, how he was watching Jenny and was it Scott or Jenny, like he was just, it was just, I don't know, it was just a very just, he's a priest, he's or a pastor, so it's
Right.
just so yeah, it was one of those. But I do feel like it is the kind of movie that I think that it is supposed to make you uncomfortable. And then again, like with us talking about the opening scene, I think that was done on purpose for it to seem like it was like an ad.
I agree. I think that there were these, it definitely was made to make us feel uncomfortable. Like you said, adding on the priest stuff too, it's like almost getting into taboo, one taboo
Yeah.
after another. And we've got this big taboo. And again, one thing I do respect about this movie is that the character of Diane, wherever people fall on the spectrum of their pro-life or pro-choice, I feel like it's
Mm-hmm.
the one of the like two areas where it's the very very young and the older generation that about abortion. And in her situation,
Right.
it involves health reasons. Her husband was dying. Clearly she loved all of her children, so she wasn't just having abortions for the sake of having them.
Right.
And I liked that the movie, and I feel like Dee Wallace would be one of the few actresses who could pull off that sort of such a taboo topic, but in a sensitive way that can at least hear that side of it. Same
Mm-hmm.
with Much Younger. And so throwing in certain things to just keep us like, reacting, I don't know if it's really necessary. But as far as how it all leads up with the ending, what did you think of the ending?
That ending was very once I thought I've been saying shocking, but it was very shocking. It kind of like what you said earlier, where it's just like no one survives. I mean, minus Jenny's baby, who has no one. She survived the night, but who does she have? So that was very unfortunate to see. But then even with that, it's like at that point, with everything that was going on in the movie, I liked the ending because it just seemed like everyone had to pay a part of her life, and it's unfortunate. And yeah, that's a horrible way to think, but I think that's the way that it turned out. And then of course with the newborn baby, that is an innocent child. Like that person has nothing to do with that. And I think that if Jerry, if that, that was an accident. So I think that Jerry would have made it, but yeah, I enjoyed the ending.
I did too. I feel like it's when you watch the movie from beginning to end, you can see that it was a well-crafted movie. We start off with the topic of babies and we end with a baby.
Yes.
We start off with the topic of, however you want to say it for lack of a better word, not having a baby versus we end with having a baby. I like movies that do have that sort of full circle
Mm-hmm.
look. And yeah, the tragedy of the movie is that Cletus is basically following Dee Wallace around saying, "Do you love me, mother? Do you love me, mother?"
Yeah.
And she just can't say it. And I love that there are times where she does want to say it, and other times she hates him. It's because it's not a simple emotion. It's
Right.
not a simple thing. I feel as a man, I don't feel like I have really any say when it comes to something like that. I think that only a woman could ever really know what that experience is
Mm-hmm.
like. And I think that as a man watching it, if I can feel that emotion to know that it is a complicated issue,
Yeah.
that I don't see why I don't think it could be broken down into terms of black and white,
Mm-hmm.
A to Z. It's a very gray, complex issue. And I think that this movie, where it succeeds is it makes a point about each of those issues, but in the end, everybody does sort of pay for their sins one way or the
Mm-hmm.
other, but not in a way that it's like you're going to pay for your sins. It's just
Right.
how, it kind of came out, and it's all anchored with everybody's got to go, including Dee Wallace. And I love that in
Mm-hmm.
the end, all she wants, because I do love that she tries to distract him. Like
Yeah.
she says these horrifying things that I don't think she would have said, but she's trying to save Ginny, Susie, and the baby. And unfortunately, Ginny and Susie aren't saved by it. She's not
Yeah.
saved by it, but she does manage to, with her first grandchild, be the grandmother to that
Yeah.
child and save that child in the end. And I do like that, but it is a very bleak ending. It's a
Yeah.
bleak ending in a very hot pink colored room.
Yeah.
And it's interesting
Yeah.
to me. it's not a movie I'm going to go back to time and time again. But for
Mhm.
those that do enjoy that kind of a Christmas horror movie, because I think that people that like Christmas horror are going to be really ready to know it's going to probably be a violent movie. Christmas
Yeah.
movies tend to be a little more violent.
Do you think that if Diane, especially Diane, but the family, we'll just say Diane, accepted Cletus, do you think that the night would have went how it went?
No, I think that, I think it would have still gone in fights. And I mean, they were already fighting about the house being sold,
Hmm.
the tensions between everybody. But I think that it was forever going to change them one way or another, especially with, Susie, who's very religious, Ginny, who's
Hmm.
not. Look at how I think this answer is kind of summed up in how Jerry reacted to it. I think he was running to his mother in the end because he wanted to find understanding, but he was very deeply hurt by by this information. But in the
Okay.
end, I think he would have accepted her, and I think she would have too. But she couldn't believe that this unbelievable situation of this child she thought was gone came back.
Hmm. Yes. I agree with you 100%. I think that like you said, it would have changed everything, but I think that everyone would have been fine, physically. Just, oh my God, who knew? It was just a whole night of like just a bloodbath.
Yeah, but this is a movie I definitely recommend for people that like a bit of gore, some visual satisfaction. If you do not enjoy some political aspects, if you're not looking for something bleak, this really isn't the movie for you. But I do recommend it for a first time, one time watch, especially at
Mhm.
Christmas time. I think that there's something to enjoy for everybody, but it's not a movie that everybody is going to enjoy. Well, thanks again, everybody, for joining us for another episode, our fourth annual episode of the Rabid Dog House. Are you a fan of Red Christmas? What's your favorite Christmas holiday horror movie? Thank you, Zena Dixon, for joining us tonight. You can find Zena over at realqueenofhorror.com, under her Real Queen of moniker on YouTube, or over at Wicked Horror. And on Justin, you can also find me at Wicked Horror, over One Pop Culture, or on Twitter at Wicked Horror Justin. Thank you, Zena, for watching Red Christmas and being here for our fourth annual episode.
Thank you so much.
Everybody have a good one. Bye-bye.